Pederastic sex more generally, a further empirical examination. As an initial evaluation of use reactions to pederastic sex more generally, data were extracted from the 5 non-clinical empirical studies in Table 1 in which reactions to man-boy sex could be isolated. Reactions were estimated via unweighted means as 27% positive, 34% neutral, and 42% negative. These estimates are crude with respect to pederastic experiences because many pedophilic experiences were included. All of these were Anglophone, 4 US, 1 British. In a different society and cultural climate, when age gap sex involving minors was temporarily more tolerated, Sandfort, 1988-1992, found that most of his Dutch male subjects with boyhood sexual experiences with older males were willing participants, 69%, who reacted on average positively in contrast to the unwilling participants, 31%, who reacted on average negatively. Willing participants were as psychologically well-adjusted as controls, and unwilling participants were slightly less well-adjusted. In 2 important forensic studies conducted outside the sexual victimological framework, results were that harm and coercion were quite uncommon. Bormann, 1983, in a large-scale study conducted for the German government, found no evidence for psychological injury in his nearly 1,000 cases of boys who had sexual encounters with men before age 14. He noted that use of force or coercion was rare in these cases, occurring instead mostly in heterosexual offenses with female victims. Gebhard et al. 1965 examined 91 cases of boys aged 12 to 15 who had sexual encounters with men and found that, according to the boys' official court accounts, they were encouraging in 70% of the cases, passive in 11%, and resistant in 16%. In these cases, they added use of force or threat was quite rare. They attributed the use generally receptive response to libidos that are well activated in males by the early teens, which is in contrast to females. They remarked that if, quote, 12 to 15-year-old girls had as developed libidos as boys of the same age, our penal institutions would burst at the seams, unquote. Page 299. They argued that a boy of this age is still flexible sexually, and if he can be persuaded, quote, he exhibits an intensity of response matching or frequently surpassing that of an adult, unquote. Page 299. In a number of interview studies based on convenience samples, positive reactions to pederastic encounters predominated. Bernard, 1981, Ingram, 1981, Leahy, 1992, Money and Weinrich, 1983, Sandfort, 1984, Sandfort and Everard, 1990, Tyndall, 1978. In each of these studies, the boys were mainly in their preteens or early teens during the contacts which occurred within friendship relationships of significant duration in which the boys' positive responses were tied in part to willingness and participation and to their perception of attainment of important non-sexual benefits, e.g. a mature friend who listens to them. For example, Tyndall, 1978, followed 9 cases of boys over 3 decades who had sexual relations with men starting between the ages of 12 and 15, and found normal psychological development and adjustment in all cases and negative signs, i.e. lingering guilt, in just 1. He reported mentoring effects in more than half the cases in which the youth's later direction, i.e. career choices, reflected their adult partner's profession and influence. As with the heterosexual boy-woman and gay boy-man reviews, this review undercuts sexual victimological theory. Since its rise to dominance 3 decades ago, sexual victimology has succeeded in framing all adult minor sex as necessarily coercive, which has heavily biased lay and professional views since. Malone, 2011. The forensic and interview studies just reviewed, conducted outside the sexual victimological framework, consistently found coercion to be rare but encouraging participation to be common. This pattern was even more pronounced in the non-clinical interview studies, where most cases were pederastic and involved willing participation within durable friendships, in which the sexual contacts were generally intimate, e.g., oral sex, and the relationships yielded valuable non-sexual benefits. By contrast, in the studies extracted from Table 1, which combined had a plurality of cases with negative reactions, sexual episodes frequently were pedophilic and often included one-time approaches or fondling, which were generally unwanted. In short, assumptions of coercion and trauma as properties of pederastic relations do not hold under empirical examination. Reactions to these events reflect the circumstances under which they occur, as other types of sexual relations do. In the three reviews just presented, what needs to be emphasized is that all these relations occurred in a society that views them as having no worth or legitimacy and that is quite hostile toward them both attitudinally and legally, especially the pederastic relations because of their homosexual nature. It is reasonable to assume that if these relations had been socially sanctioned, invested with value, and encouraged, as they have been in numerous other cultures to be reviewed later, they would have been experienced even more positively on average. The rather high levels of positive reactions under the conditions of our culture, therefore, should be taken as a strong indication of not only the incorrectness of sexual victimological theory, but its wrong-headedness as well, because it has strongly biased the objective appraisal of these relations, clinical perceptions of them, and views more generally throughout our society. As per Bullo 1976 and Ford and Beach 1951, historical, cross-cultural, and cross-species considerations are indicated to remedy these biases.